My daughter and I were trapped in our apartment when the zombie outbreak hit. I need to tell you something. And I need you to understand that I'm not asking for forgiveness. Forgiveness implies I'd do something different if I could rewind the clock. And I wouldn't. Not a single decision. Not even the ones that cost me everything I was. My name is Sandra Okafor. I'm 41 years old. I was a project manager for a commercial construction firm in downtown Milwaukee. And for 17 years, I solved problems for a living. Structural problems, logistical problems, personnel problems. I was the person they called when a $20 million timeline was collapsing and someone needed to stand in the gap and hold it together with competence and force of will. I was good at it. I was better than good. I built my identity around the certainty that every problem had a solution if you were smart enough, fast enough, and willing to absorb the pressure others couldn't handle. My daughter Zoe was 15 when the outbreak hit. She was 5'7", had her father's angular jaw and my stubborn mouth. And she'd spent the previous 6 months making it abundantly clear that she didn't need me managing her life anymore. We fought about curfews. We fought about her phone. We fought about a boy named Deshaun who was too old for her and too confident for my comfort. She'd started closing her bedroom door in a way that felt like a thesis statement. And I'd responded the only way I knew how. By fixing the problem. By scheduling. By controlling the inputs until the outputs aligned with my expectations. That was a Tuesday in October. Zoe had come home early from school because the district sent everyone home at noon. Something about a water main break, they said. I didn't question it because I was on a conference call about a delayed concrete pour. And my daughter walking through the door at 12:15 instead of 3:30 was just a scheduling anomaly I'd process later. She looked wrong. I noticed it the way you notice a picture frame that's been bumped. Something geometrically off that your eye catches before your brain names it. Her color was strange. Not pale exactly, but matte. Like someone had adjusted the saturation on her skin. And she was holding her left forearm against her stomach in a way that looked protective. "You're home early," I said, muting my call. "They sent us home." "Water main?" She didn't answer. She walked to the kitchen and ran the tap over her arm, and I watched the water turn pink. "Zoe." "It's nothing." "Show me." She turned around and held out her forearm like she was offering me evidence in a case she'd already decided I wasn't qualified to judge. The wound was ragged. Not clean, not a cut. A bite mark. Human teeth. The kind of crescent that bruises purple around the edges and weeps from punctures that went deep enough to find something worth bleeding. "Deshaun," I said, because my mind went to the worst thing I could imagine, which tells you everything about what I was still capable of imagining. "No, Mom." She looked at me with something I'd never seen in her face before. Patience. Actual patience. The kind you show someone who doesn't understand yet. It was Mr. Alderman. In the hallway. He grabbed me and he bit me, and then 3 other teachers pulled him off. And he bit Mrs. Torres too, and they sent everyone home. Mr. Alderman taught sophomore English. He'd emailed me 2 weeks ago about Zoe's participation grade. "We need to go to urgent care," I said, already moving toward my keys, my phone, my purse, the constellation of objects that meant I was solving something. "Mom, stop." She said it the way I used to say it to her when she was small and running toward a street. With authority. I already know what this is. Everyone at school already knows. It's been online for 3 days. What has been online? The infection, the biting, the people who don't stop. "Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear me." She sat down at the kitchen table. She pressed a dish towel against her arm. She looked like a woman. "I have maybe 48 hours before I turn into one of them," she said. "Maybe less. And I came home because I didn't want to be anywhere else. I want to tell you that I handled it with grace, that my years of managing crises kicked in, and I became a steady, reassuring presence for my daughter in her moment of impossible revelation. But that would be a lie. And I promised I wouldn't ask for forgiveness, which means I owe you accuracy instead." I laughed. Not a real laugh. Something mechanical and dismissive that came out of me like a reflex. The sound you make when someone tells you something so far outside your operational framework that your brain rejects the input entirely and substitutes embarrassment for comprehension. "Zoe, that's not... People don't turn into things. That's a movie. Let me see the bite. We need antibiotics. We need a tetanus shot. Let me..." "Mom." She hadn't moved, hadn't raised her voice. "Look outside." I looked. Our apartment was on the 6th floor of a building on Wisconsin Avenue. And from the kitchen window, you could see the street below and about 3 blocks of the commercial district stretching east. What I saw was traffic. Dense, unusual traffic for a Tuesday at noon. Cars stopped at angles that suggested abandonment rather than parking. A woman running on the sidewalk below, carrying nothing. Not a purse, not a phone, just running with her arms pumping like she was being timed. And further down the block, at the intersection with 3rd Street, a cluster of people that moved like a single organism. Their coordination all wrong. Their pace alternating between stillness and sudden violent acceleration. "How long have you known about this?" I asked, still watching the street. Processing, filing. "About a week. Everyone at school knew. The videos were on TikTok, then Reddit. Then they started getting taken down, which made everyone share them faster. Mom, it's real. The bite transmits something. It takes between 12 and 72 hours. Some people faster. Mr. Alderman was normal yesterday." I turned from the window and looked at my daughter. Really looked. She was calm. She was organized in her thinking. She was delivering information in a structure I recognized because it was mine. Clear, sequential, prioritized. And somewhere beneath the calm, she was terrified. But she was holding it away from her voice with a discipline I'd never seen her use before. 48 hours, I said. That's the average people were reporting online, but nobody actually knows. Some people turned in 6 hours. Some lasted 3 days. And there's nothing that stops it? No. The words sat between us. I felt my entire professional identity. The fixer, the solver, the woman who held $20 million timelines together, become irrelevant in a single syllable. There was no solution. There was no call I could make, no resource I could deploy, no timeline I could restructure. My daughter was sitting at our kitchen table with a bite wound on her arm, telling me she was going to become something inhuman. And for the first time in 17 years, I had no plan. So I made one anyway, because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. Okay, I said. We locked down the apartment. We have supplies for about 2 weeks. I'm going to secure the building entrance. I'm going to find out if anyone else in the building has medical training. I'm going to... Mom, stop fixing. I'm not fixing, I'm preparing. You're preparing for after, she said. I need you to be here for now. That stopped me. Physically stopped my hands from reaching for my phone. Stopped my feet from carrying me toward the door. My 15-year-old daughter, with a death sentence on her arm and a dish towel turning red at the edges, had just told me the thing no one in my professional life had ever been brave enough to say. That my competence was a way of leaving the room without walking out. I sat down. Okay, I said. I'm here. I wasn't. Not yet. I was already calculating in the back of my mind. Hours, supplies, barricade options, evacuation routes, the structural integrity of our apartment door, the load-bearing capacities of the hallway furniture I could stack against it. But my body was in the chair, and my eyes were on my daughter. And for now, that was the most I could offer. "Tell me everything you know," I said. She did. What Zoe told me over the next hour assembled itself into a picture I couldn't have drawn from the fragments of news I'd been ignoring for the past week. I'd seen headlines, scattered reports of violent incidents in several cities, a CDC advisory about atypical aggression associated with an unidentified pathogen. But I'd processed them the way I processed everything that didn't directly affect my schedule. As background noise, information without actionable consequence. Zoe had been paying attention the way her generation paid attention, laterally, across platforms, synthesizing footage and first-hand accounts and speculation into something that approximated understanding, even when the official channels were still calibrating their denial. She told me about the progression, the initial fever that most people mistook for flu, the coordination changes that started in the hands and spread to gait, the window of lucidity that narrowed until the infected person's eyes stopped tracking faces and started tracking movement. She told me that the speed varied wildly. Some people shambled, some sprinted, and you couldn't predict which until it was happening. "And the ones who turn," I said, Are they still in there?" "Nobody knows. The video's cut off before anyone gets close enough to find out." I looked at her arm. The bleeding had slowed. The punctures were dark now, not the bright red of fresh injury, but something deeper, like the blood beneath was thickening. Or maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was already looking for signs, because looking for signs was the only job available to me. "Does it hurt?" "It's starting to feel warm, not bad warm, like a heating pad." I cataloged that. Warm at hour 1. What came at hour 6, hour 12? I wanted data. I wanted a spreadsheet with rows of symptoms and columns of time frames, something I could track and measure and predict from. But my daughter's body wasn't a construction timeline, and there was no spreadsheet for watching someone you may dissolve into something you can't recognize. A sound from the hallway interrupted us. Not a knock, something heavier. A body against a door, followed by a voice I recognized as Gerald from 6C, shouting something I couldn't parse through the walls but whose register communicated panic clearly enough. I stood up. "Stay here. Mom, I'm not leaving the apartment. I'm looking through the peephole." I crossed our living room. 12 steps. I'd measured it once for a furniture delivery. And pressed my eye to the small glass circle in our front door. The hallway was empty in my limited field of view, but I could hear Gerald's voice more clearly now. He was telling someone to get back, to stop, to please stop. Then a sound I'd never heard a human being make. A vocalization stripped of language. Guttural, continuous, rising in pitch like a machine winding up. And Gerald's voice disappeared beneath it. I stepped back from the door. My hand found the deadbolt and turned it. Then the chain. Then I pulled our narrow hallway table, the one I'd bought at an estate sale for $40, and wedged it diagonally between the door and the opposite wall. It wouldn't hold against sustained force. I knew the math. I'd managed enough construction to know what pressure did to wood and metal. But it was something. When I turned around, Zoe was standing at the entrance to the living room, watching me with that new expression, the patient one. "Gerald?" she asked. "I think so." She nodded, didn't cry, didn't ask me to do anything about it. We stood there listening as the sounds from the hallway resolved into something terrible And then, worse, resolved into silence. Whatever had happened to Gerald from 6C was over in under 2 minutes. My daughter looked at her arm. "Mom," she said, "I need you to understand something. In maybe 2 days, that's going to be me." We don't know that. I do know that. And I need you to hear me say it, because everything that happens next depends on you believing me. I believed her. God help me, I already believed her. The first 6 hours were mine. I owned them completely. Not because Zoe needed me to, but because my hands refused to be idle and my brain refused to accept a problem without generating solutions. I secured the apartment with the methodical intensity of someone who has managed construction sites for nearly 2 decades and knows exactly how much force a standard residential door can absorb before it fails. The answer is less than you'd think. A hollow-core interior door, even with a deadbolt, will buckle under 300 pounds of sustained force. Our front door was solid-core, steel-reinforced frame, which bought us time but not immunity. I stacked the hallway table, then the bookshelf from the living room, emptied of its contents, and turned sideways. I used the toolkit I kept under the kitchen sink, left over from a shelf installation I'd done in September, to drive screws through the bookshelf frame into the wall studs on either side of the door. It wasn't elegant. It was functional. Zoe watched me work from the couch, her injured arm resting on a pillow, the dish towel replaced now with proper gauze and medical tape from our bathroom cabinet. She'd cleaned the wound herself while I was fortifying the entrance. And when I came back to check it, she'd done a better job than I would have. Neat edges, appropriate pressure. She'd learned that from a YouTube video about field medicine, she told me. Learned it 3 days ago, because she'd been paying attention while I'd been managing a concrete pour. "I'm going to inventory our food," I said. "Already did it." She held up her phone, where she'd typed a list in her notes app. 11 cans of soup, various, 2 boxes of pasta, half a bag of rice, 6 cans of black beans, peanut butter, almost full, bread, half a loaf. The freezer has chicken breasts, frozen vegetables, and ice cream. We have about 2 weeks if we ration. I stared at her. "When did you do this?" "While you were screwing the bookshelf into the wall. Mom, I've been thinking about this for a week. I know what we have. I know what we don't have. What we didn't have. Weapons beyond kitchen knives. Medical supplies beyond basic first aid. Communication beyond cell phones that still worked but carried increasingly fragmented information. A way out of a 6th-floor apartment that didn't involve either the elevator, disabled since the building's power had started flickering, or the stairwell, which shared a wall with 6C and whatever had happened to Gerald. "Your phone," I said. "Is your father—" "No signal for calls. Texts are going through intermittently. I sent Dad a message an hour ago. Nothing back yet. Robert lived in Minneapolis. Remarried, 1 stepchild. A comfortable distance that made co-parenting logistically clean and emotionally uncomplicated. He was a good father in the ways that mattered across distance. Consistent, interested, financially reliable. But he was 400 miles away. And the highways between Milwaukee and Minneapolis ran through open territory I couldn't assess from a 6th-floor window. "He'll be okay," Zoe said. "He's smart." "I know." "I mean, you don't have to worry about him. You have enough to worry about here." She meant herself. She meant the countdown she'd declared, and I'd refused to fully accept. She meant focus. And she was right, the way she'd been right about so many things in the past hour that I was starting to feel something I'd never felt as her mother. Not just pride, but displacement. She was ahead of me. She'd been ahead of me for a week, processing something I'd only begun to comprehend. and the distance between our understanding was not something I could close with effort or authority. The power flickered again, a brownout that dimmed the lights for 4 seconds before they recovered. "That's the third time," Zoe said. "The grid is failing. It might hold. It won't. We should fill every container with water now, while the pumps still work." She was right again. I went to the kitchen and began filling pots, pitchers, the large mixing bowl, the bathtub. My daughter directed me from the couch like a contractor managing a subcontractor, and I let her. Night came early, or felt like it did. By 5 o'clock, the light through our windows had taken on the quality of a permanent dusk. Not because the sun had set prematurely, but because the city's ambient glow was diminishing. Streetlights flickered in patterns that suggested cascading electrical failures. The traffic below had stopped entirely. The cars remained where they'd been abandoned, but the street itself was empty of living movement, except for occasional bursts. Someone running, always running, never walking, and the slower shapes that followed them. From 6 floors up, the infected looked wrong in ways that distance couldn't disguise. Their locomotion had a mechanical quality, like marionettes operated by someone who understood joints, but not rhythm. Some moved in straight lines with a commitment that ignored obstacles. I watched one walk directly into a parked car, fall, stand, and continue on the same vector without course correction. Others moved in spirals, circling areas where I assumed sound or movement had drawn them. "Don't watch," Zoe said from behind me. She'd moved to the dining table and was writing something in a notebook. "What are you doing?" "Writing down how I feel, in case it helps someone later." I turned from the window. "Zoe, Mom, I'm being practical. If someone figures out how to stop this, they'll need first-hand accounts of the progression. I'm documentation." She wrote another line. "Right now I feel normal. Slightly warm in the arm. Slight headache starting. Appetite is fine. Cognition is fine. Emotional state is..." She paused, focused. "You sound like a medical report." "I sound like someone giving useful information. You should be glad. You raised someone who can organize under pressure." I was glad. I was terrified. I was watching my daughter approach her own potential death with a structural clarity that made my throat close. And I couldn't decide if I was witnessing courage or dissociation, or some hybrid of both that only a 15-year-old who'd grown up watching her mother manage chaos could produce. I sat down across from her at the table. "What do you want to do tonight?" I asked. A ridiculous question. A Tuesday night question. "What do you want for dinner? Do you have homework? Should we watch something together?" She looked up from her notebook and I saw it. The first crack. Not in her composure, but in her certainty. A flicker of something younger behind her eyes. Something that wanted me to be the one with the plan. "Can we watch a movie?" she said. "Of course. Something dumb, something with no zombies." "I think I can manage that." We watched a romantic comedy on my laptop. Something we'd seen twice before, where the outcome was guaranteed and the worst thing that happened was a misunderstanding at an airport. Zoe sat close to me on the couch, closer than she'd sat in months. Her head found my shoulder partway through the second act, and I felt her body heat against my side. Normal, human, unchanged. My daughter, warm and breathing and present and sharp, leaning against me like she used to when she was small and storms made the windows shake. I didn't sleep that night. She did. Curled on her side of the couch, a blanket pulled to her chin, her breathing even and unlabored. I sat in the kitchen with my phone, reading what fragments of information I could still pull from the disintegrating internet. The CDC had gone silent at 8 p.m. FEMA's website loaded once, displayed a single instruction, shelter in place, and then timed out permanently. Local news broadcasts had stopped. The radio offered static on most frequencies and a single automated loop on the emergency band. A tone, then a recorded voice saying, "Remain indoors. Help is coming. Remain indoors." It repeated every 40 seconds. Help wasn't coming. I knew it the way I know when a project timeline is dead. Not from a single data point, but from the aggregate silence of people who should be talking. At 3 a.m., Zoe's arm began to glow. Not glow exactly. That's too theatrical. Luminescence implies beauty. What I saw was a faint thermal shimmer beneath her skin, visible only because the apartment was dark. And I was watching her with the attention of someone who'd been tracking symptoms for 9 hours without pause. The veins along her forearm, radiating from the bite, had taken on a slightly raised quality. And in the absolute darkness of a city without power, they carried a faint warmth that registered to my eyes as light. I touched her forehead. She was warmer than she should have been, not a raging fever, but the kind of elevated temperature that, under normal circumstances, would have prompted ibuprofen and a glass of water and a check-in at dawn. Under these circumstances, it prompted a cold, spreading understanding that the timeline Zoe had described was not theoretical. She stirred, but didn't wake. I pulled my hand back and sat on the floor beside the couch, my back against its base. And I did something I hadn't done since Robert left 5 years ago. I cried without sound, without letting my body shake enough to disturb the cushions. A controlled, efficient grief that leaked from my eyes and ran along the channels of my face in the dark. And I wiped it away with the back of my hand and kept watching the street below through the window and listening to my daughter breathe. By 5 a.m., I'd made a plan. Not a good one. There were no good plans available. But a plan that satisfied the part of my brain that refused to accept a problem without generating solutions. I would prepare Zoe to survive alone. I would teach her everything I knew about structural assessment, about resource management, about reading a building for egress options, and a group for power dynamics. I would compress 17 years of professional competence into however many hours we had left. And when I was gone, no. Stop. I'm getting ahead of myself. That was the plan at 5 a.m. It was the wrong plan. Zoe hadn't told me yet what she needed instead. At 6:30, the sun came up gray and reluctant. The city below was still, not peaceful, empty in a way that felt pressurized, like the silence before a structural failure. I made coffee on the gas stove. The electricity had died completely at 4 a.m., but the gas still flowed. And the familiar ritual of grinding beans and heating water and pouring through the filter gave my hands something to do that didn't involve calculating my daughter's remaining hours. Zoe woke at 7. She sat up slowly, looked at her arm, and nodded to herself like she was confirming a delivery schedule. "Temperature's higher," she said. "Maybe 99, 100. Not bad. Headache is worse. Arm doesn't hurt anymore. It's numb, actually, from the elbow down." She flexed her fingers, studying them with clinical interest. "Grip strength is decreased, maybe 60%. Motor control is fine, though." "How's your—" I didn't know how to ask. "How's your mind? Are you still you? Are you still my daughter in there?" "I'm still me, Mom. I'll tell you when I'm not." I handed her coffee. She took it with her right hand. "I made a plan," I said. I can see it on your face. You want to teach me everything before you think I lose the ability to learn. That's not exactly. Mom. She sipped her coffee. That's a plan for after. I told you yesterday. I need you to be here for now. The morning progressed with a strange domesticity that I think surprised us both. Zoe showered, carefully, keeping her wound dry with a plastic bag rubber banded around her forearm, and dressed in clean clothes. She ate scrambled eggs I made on the gas burner. She sat at the kitchen table with her notebook and recorded her observations with the same focused attention she gave to essays she actually cared about. Which was a precision and rigor her English teacher, Mr. Alderman, had once praised in a parent conference email that now made my stomach lurch. 12 hours since the bite, she said, writing. Fever is consistent, 99.3. Left arm numbness has spread to shoulder. Right side unaffected. Appetite normal. Cognition clear. Emotional regulation intact. Slight photosensitivity. The window light feels aggressive. Close the curtain? No, I want to see outside. I need to see what I'm becoming. That word, becoming, landed in my chest like a physical object. Not dying, becoming. My daughter wasn't describing a countdown to nothing. She was describing a transformation she intended to witness from the inside for as long as her consciousness allowed. I sat across from her with my own coffee, cooling in my hands, and forced myself to ask the question I'd been constructing since 3 a.m. What do you want me to do? When you're not? When I turn? Yes. She set her pen down, looked at me the way I'd looked at project timelines that had no remaining flexibility. Honestly, without flinching. I don't want you to kill me. I know that's what the survival guides say. I know it's what the internet was recommending before it went down. I don't want it. Okay. I want to stay here, in the apartment, with you. Zoe, hear me out. She held up her right hand, steady, controlled, deliberate. I've been thinking about this for a week. Since I first saw the videos and realized this was real and coming here. I thought about what I'd want if it was me. And what I want is to not be alone, and to not be killed by someone who loves me. I want to still be somewhere, even if I'm not me anymore. I want my body to still be somewhere that was home. You're asking me to live with you after you turn. I'm asking you to figure out how. You're the best problem solver I know. You managed a 30-story building project when 2 subcontractors went bankrupt simultaneously. You can figure out how to contain 1 infected person in a 2-bedroom apartment. I stared at my daughter. My 15-year-old daughter who had, in the space of 24 hours, dismantled every expectation I had about our dynamic, about who led and who followed, about who protected and who needed protecting, and replaced it with a request so structurally audacious that my professional mind immediately began sketching solutions. Containment, in an apartment, for 1 infected individual, indefinitely. The bedroom, I said, my voice catching up to my brain. Your bedroom. The door is solid, the frame is intact. If I reinforce the hinges and add a bar, now you're thinking. But food, water, will you need? I don't know. Nobody documented what happens after. Just the turning part. What they eat, what they need. Nobody stuck around long enough to find out. Zoe, this might not be possible. Then we'll figure that out when we get there. But I need you to try. I need you to approach this like it's a project with a difficult spec, not like it's a tragedy with a predetermined ending. I looked at her notebook, at her careful handwriting, documenting her own transformation with the rigor of a researcher. And I understood finally what she was asking. Not for me to fix her, not for me to save her, but for me to solve the problem of keeping her present in my life, even after she stopped being the version of herself that could ask for it. "Okay," I said. "Show me the spec." We spent the next 2 hours redesigning our apartment. Not metaphorically, literally. With pencil and paper, measuring tape, and the structural knowledge I'd accumulated over 2 decades of managing builds. We mapped our 900 square foot space and converted it from a home into a habitat. Zoe's bedroom was 11 by 12 with a single window facing the alley. The window was small, too small for an adult body to fit through, which was actually an advantage now. The door was interior hollow core, which was insufficient. But the frame was set into a load-bearing wall, which meant I could add reinforcement without worrying about structural compromise to the surrounding architecture. "I need the door replaced or reinforced," I said, sketching. "The closet door in my bedroom is solid wood. I can remove it and swap. Then I need a latch system that can be operated from outside, but not inside. The sliding barrel bolt from the bathroom," Zoe offered, "and the chain lock from the front door. You can relocate it." "Good. And ventilation. The window stays closed, but I'll leave the vent open. It draws air from the building's central system. And even if that fails, the gap under the door provides passive airflow." "What about sound?" I looked at her. "I'm going to make noise, Mom. After. The ones outside make noise. I'll make noise too, and you're going to have to hear it. And I need to know you can handle that." I hadn't thought about sound. I'd been thinking structurally, forces, materials, barriers. And I'd somehow bypassed the obvious reality that my daughter, after she turned, would produce the same guttural, inhuman vocalizations I'd heard through the wall when Gerald from 6C was taken. That I would hear those sounds coming from the bedroom where she'd slept since she was 10 years old, where her debate trophies still lined the shelf and her clothes still hung in the closet. "I can handle it," I said. "You're lying, but that's okay. You'll learn." We continued planning. Water supply. I'd run a tube from the kitchen through the wall gap. There was a pre-existing hole where a cable had once been routed, so I could deliver water without opening the door. Food, unknown. We didn't know if the infected ate, drank, or needed anything at all. The hallway outside her bedroom would become a buffer zone, cleared of obstacles, lit by battery-powered camping lanterns I had from a work site I'd once managed in a building with unreliable power. "What about the rest of the apartment?" Zoe asked. "Your space. How do you survive?" "Same plan as before. Rationed food, water reserves, minimal movement. I stay quiet. The ones outside don't have reason to target this floor if I don't give them one." "And if they breach the front door?" "The reinforcement should hold against—" "Mom, if they breach it." I put my pencil down. "Then I have the fire escape. The window in the living room connects to it. Down 6 flights to the alley." "Where you go where?" I didn't have an answer for that. The plan had a boundary, and the boundary was the walls of this apartment. And beyond those walls was a city I couldn't predict or manage or solve. I'd been avoiding that truth since the moment Zoe walked through the door yesterday with blood on her arm. "One problem at a time," I said. "That's not good enough." "It's what I have." She picked up her pen and wrote something in her notebook. I caught a glimpse. Hour 14. Mother's planning framework still bounded by apartment walls. Denial presenting as tactical conservatism. My daughter was documenting my psychological state alongside her physical one. I want you to survive this, she said without looking up. Not just the next 2 weeks. I want you to survive whatever this world becomes. And I need you to start thinking past these walls to do that. At noon, 24 hours since Zoe had walked through the door with the bite, the building made a sound I'd never heard it make. Not a structural groan, which I'd have recognized from years of being present during settling and shifting in new construction. This was rhythmic, percussive, coming from below and traveling upward through the concrete and steel frame like something was testing the building's skeleton for weakness. "That's them," Zoe said. She'd moved to the couch, her left arm now fully numb and resting at her side like an object she was carrying rather than a part of her body. "They're in the lower floors." "How do you know?" "I can—" She paused, looked confused for the first time. "I can hear them differently now. Lower sounds are carrying more. My hearing is changing." I logged that. Hour 24, auditory sensitivity increasing. I'd become a secondary researcher in Zoe's documentation project, tracking her changes from the outside while she tracked them from within. "What do they sound like to you?" "Like a frequency, like a hum beneath the banging. Mom, it's not random. They're not just hitting things. There's a pattern. They're—" She tilted her head. "Echoing, off each other. One hits, another hits in response. They're communicating." "Zoe, I know how it sounds. Write it down." I wrote it down. In my own notebook now, a yellow legal pad I'd grabbed from my work bag. Beside it, I had my sketches of the bedroom conversion, my supply inventory, my water calculations. 2 parallel documents. One engineering, one biology. Both describing the same project, keeping my daughter present. The percussion from below intensified at 12:30, then stopped abruptly. Silence worse than the noise. I moved to the peephole and saw nothing in our hallway. Empty, unchanged since Gerald's disappearance yesterday. Though a dark stain had spread from beneath 6C's door and dried to a color I refused to name. "They're between the 2nd and 4th floors based on the resonance," Zoe said from the couch. Her voice had taken on a quality I was trying very hard not to name. Slightly lower. Not deeper exactly, but denser. Like her vocal cords were thickening. How do you feel?" "Present, aware, thinking clearly." She lifted her right hand and touched her own face, pressing fingertips against her cheek like she was checking for something. "My skin is different. More conductive. Touch feels louder." I crossed the room and knelt beside the couch, put my hand on her forehead. She was burning, not the gentle warmth of this morning, but a deep, radiating heat that felt like standing near industrial equipment. And yet she looked at me with eyes that were entirely hers. Clear, focused, intelligent, patient. "You're very hot," I said. "I know. It doesn't hurt, though. Nothing hurts. That's probably not a good sign, medically speaking. Pain is information." She turned her head and looked at me with sudden intensity. "Mom, I need to tell you something while I'm still completely lucid and certain." "Tell me." "I've never doubted that you love me. I know the past 6 months have been. I know I've been pushing you away and testing you and making everything into a fight. But I never once doubted it. I want you to know that. Zoe, I'm not dying right now. I'm just telling you, because I might not be able to say it clearly later, and I want it documented." She reached for her notebook and wrote, "Hour 24. Told my mother I know she loves me, for the record." I put my hand over hers on the paper. Her skin was so hot. my daughter's hand, writing her own transformation into history, and all I could do was hold it. The next 12 hours were the ones that broke the person I'd been and built something else in her place. Not better, not worse. Different in a way that doesn't have a category. You don't prepare for this. There's no professional development course, no crisis management seminar, no parenting book that covers watching your child dissolve into something else while she narrates the process with scientific detachment and occasional dark humor. Hour 26. Zoe's left leg went numb. She documented it matter-of-factly. Spreading faster now, peripheral nervous system compromised bilaterally, and then looked at me and said, "I'm going to need help getting to the bathroom soon. Fair warning." I helped her, held her weight on my shoulder as she walked on a leg that was quickly becoming unreliable, and she gripped the door frame with her right hand and made a joke about how at least she'd never have to do a fitness test in gym class again. Hour 29. Her temperature was immeasurable by our household thermometer, which topped out at 104. She wasn't sweating. The heat simply radiated from her without the body's normal cooling response. I kept cloths soaked in cool water on her forehead, more for my own need to do something than for any measurable effect. Hour 31. The sound started, not from her throat, from her chest. A low vibration, below speech, below humming, that came and went in pulses. She noticed it before I did. "It's like a second heartbeat," she said. "Slower, deliberate. Mom, it feels like something is building in there. Not pain, structure." "Zoe, we should move you to your room soon." "Not yet. I'll tell you when." "How will you know?" She looked at me with her clear, brown, intelligent eyes, still hers, entirely hers, and said, "Because I'll start wanting to move toward the sound from downstairs instead of away from it. When I want to go toward them, that's when you lock the door." Hour 33. She stopped writing in her notebook, not because she couldn't, her right hand still worked, but because she said the thoughts were coming differently. Not words as much, shapes, spatial awareness expanding. "I can feel the walls, Mom. Feel them like how you probably feel a blueprint. The structure is very loud." I didn't understand. I wrote it down anyway. Hour 34. She asked me to bring everything important into the living room. All our supplies, all our water, my sleeping bag, my tools. "Set yourself up out here," she said. "Make this your base. When I'm in the room, you stay out here. Clear boundaries. You don't open that door for any reason. What if I need something, the me that needs it won't ask politely. You'll know the difference between a request and a demand. Trust the door." I moved everything. Reorganized the living room into a functional base camp. Food stored in the kitchen, water in every available container, tools accessible, sleeping bag against the wall furthest from Zoe's bedroom. I worked with a focus that felt like prayer. Physical, repetitive, precise. And Zoe watched me from the couch with the expression I finally identified. Pride. She was proud of me. My 15-year-old daughter, 34 hours into a transformation that would take her from me, was watching me build a survival architecture to her specifications. And she was proud that I was listening. "Good," she said when I finished. "That's good, Mom. What else do you need?" "One more hour, then I'll walk in myself." At hour 35, Zoe stood up from the couch under her own power. Her left side was unreliable. She listed, compensating with her right leg and gripping the wall, but she refused my arm. She stood in the hallway between the living room and the bedrooms, and she looked at the open door to her room, which I'd already converted. The solid door from my closet now hung on reinforced hinges. The barrel bolt was mounted, The chain was relocated. Inside, her bed remained. Sheets clean, pillow in place, along with a jug of water and a battery lantern. "It looks like a cell," she said. "It looks like a room that keeps you safe." "It keeps you safe, Mom. I'll be fine in there regardless." She turned to face me, fully turned, committing her whole body to the rotation in a way that looked wrong. Too fluid, too coordinated for someone whose left side wasn't responding to normal commands. "I'm going to say some things now, and I need you to hear them as instructions, not requests. Okay? 1. Do not open this door. Not for crying, not for begging, not for silence. Whatever comes out of my mouth after I stop being me is not communication. It's mechanical. Do you understand?" "Yes." 2. Survive longer than your supplies. When the food runs out, you leave. You take the fire escape, you go north. The density should be lower north of the river. You find people. You tell them what I documented. The notebook stays with you. Zoe. 3. She stepped toward me, close. Her body heat was extraordinary. Standing near her felt like standing near a furnace. And yet her face was calm, her eyes clear, her expression focused. 3. Remember that I chose this. I walked home. I could have stayed at school. I could have run or hidden or gone to Dad's. I came home because this is where I wanted to be. And you are who I wanted to be with. This isn't something that happened to you. This is something I chose, and you're honoring my choice by staying. I couldn't speak. My throat was closed. My hands were shaking in a way they'd never shaken on any job site, in any crisis, in any moment of professional pressure. 4, she said, and her voice cracked for the first time in 2 days. The first real fracture. A sound like a child breaking through the surface of a woman. 4 is that I love you, and I'm not scared. And the thing I'm most afraid of right now is not what's happening to my body. It's that you'll blame yourself for not being able to fix this, for not seeing it coming, for being on a conference call when I walked through the door. I should have. No. There was nothing to do. There was never anything to do. You're not God, Mom. You're just really good at your job. And your job now is to outlive me. She walked into her room. 12 steps, the same distance as our living room, I realized, because the apartment was symmetrical in ways I'd never bothered to notice. She sat on her bed. She looked at me. "Close it," she said. I closed the door. I slid the bolt. I fastened the chain. And I stood in the hallway with my hand flat against the wood, and I felt her heat through the door, like a furnace behind a wall. And I listened to her breathing, still regular, still human, still my daughter's breath. And I counted each one like currency I was spending. She talked through the door for another 3 hours, sometimes to me, sometimes into her own documentation, narrating changes I couldn't see but could hear in the progressive alteration of her voice. The density increased, the pitch lowered. At hour 38, she said her vision was changing, peripheral awareness expanding while focal clarity decreased. Like wide-angle lens replacing telephoto, she said, and I wrote it down on my legal pad outside her door. At hour 39, she laughed. A real laugh. Startled, genuine, almost delighted. "What?" I pressed my ear to the door. "I can hear your heartbeat through the wall, Mom. It's fast. You should try to calm down." "I'm fine." "You're not, but that's okay. Mine is slow now. Really slow. Maybe 30 beats a minute. But strong. It feels like it's getting more efficient." At hour 40, the words started coming slower. Not confused, considered. like each sentence required more assembly than it used to. Getting harder, she said. To put words in order. Meaning is still there. Packaging is harder. It's okay. You don't have to talk. Want to, while I still can. Mom? I'm here. You always made everything work. Every time something broke, the car, the apartment, the marriage, you fixed the structure around it. You held the frame together. You're doing it now, with the door and the bolt and the plans. That's my job. It was my job too, to let you fix things, so you could feel like you were enough. A long pause. Her breathing had slowed to something I could count, 4 breaths a minute. I was always enough for you. You know that, right? Not because you fixed me, because I was here. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the hallway floor, my back against her door, my hand still flat against the wood. I know that, I said. Good. Another long pause. When she spoke again, the words came out one at a time, with spaces between them that felt geological. Going to stop talking soon. Not because scared. Because the words are going somewhere else. Somewhere wider. I'm here, Zoe. No. A breath that filled the room behind the door. Love you. Documented. Then silence. Not immediate. There were small sounds for another hour. Movement. The creak of her bed, something that might have been her hand against the wall on her side, mirroring mine. But no more words. The language left, and what remained was breath and motion, and the heat that pulsed through the door into my palm like a second heartbeat. At hour 42, the sound began. Not the guttural vocalization I'd heard from Gerald's hallway. Something different. Lower, more rhythmic, more intentional. A drone that rose and fell in cycles, like breathing made audible. Not aggressive, not pained, present. My daughter's body making a sound that wasn't speech, but wasn't nothing. I stayed against the door all night. Morning again, day 3. I peeled myself off the hallway floor with joints that protested and a spine that had memorized the shape of the door frame. The apartment was cold. The gas had died overnight, which meant no heat, no stove, no hot water. October in Milwaukee without utilities. I could see my breath. From behind Zoe's door, the drone continued. Slower now. A long, low note that lasted 30 seconds, then silence for 10, then the note again. Regular as a machine. Regular as breathing, which I suppose it still was. I allowed myself 30 seconds of stillness. Then I became the person Zoe had asked me to become. A survivor who solves the next problem. Problem 1. Heat. The apartment had an electric furnace, useless without power. I had blankets. I had the winter coat from the hall closet, the sleeping bag rated to 20 degrees. I could layer and endure. Problem 2. Food preparation without gas. Everything remaining was either canned and edible cold, or dry goods requiring cooking. I could eat canned soup at room temperature indefinitely. It would be miserable. It would sustain me. Problem 3. Information. I needed to know what was happening outside. My phone was dead. The battery had drained overnight when I'd been too focused on Zoe to think about charging. No power meant no recharge. I had a small battery pack in my work bag with enough capacity for 1 full charge. I'd save that for emergency communication if signals ever resumed. I ate cold black beans directly from the can. I drank water from the bathtub supply, filtered through a coffee filter more out of psychological comfort than genuine purification need. The water had been clean when I collected it. I brushed my teeth, I changed my clothes. Routine as architecture, structure as survival. Then I went to Zoe's door. Zoe. I said it knowing there would be no verbal response, saying it anyway because the word was mine to say regardless of who could hear it. It's morning. I'm going to check on you through the gap. I knelt and looked through the centimeter-wide gap beneath the door. I could see the floor of her room, carpet, the edge of her bed frame, and her feet. She was standing, barefoot, still in the clothes she'd walked in wearing yesterday. Her feet were planted shoulder-width apart, with a stability that looked deliberate, not casual. She wasn't swaying, wasn't moving, just standing in the center of her room, facing the wall, perfectly still between drone cycles. "I'm going to push water through," I said. I'd rigged the tube through the cable hole in the wall, a length of aquarium tubing from the kit I'd bought years ago for a project I never completed. I squeezed the trigger on the small pump mechanism I'd attached and watched water flow through the wall into the bowl I'd placed inside her room before she'd entered. The water filled the bowl. I released the pump, and I watched through the gap as her feet turned. A single pivot, both feet rotating 90 degrees simultaneously, and she walked to the bowl. I heard the sound of drinking. Slow, mechanical, but purposeful. She still drank. I sat back on my heels and felt something shift in my chest. Not relief exactly. Verification. My daughter's body still needed water, still performed the basic function of sustaining itself. And the architecture I'd built, the tube, the pump, the bowl, had served its purpose. One system working. I could build on that. Day 3 became day 4, became day 5, in a rhythm that I built deliberately, because rhythm was the only alternative to collapse. I woke at dawn. Gray, cold, the apartment dimming further as whatever ambient light the dying city still produced continued to fade. I ate. I checked the door. I spoke to Zoe through the wood, not expecting responses, but maintaining the communication channel as a structural element of my sanity. I pushed water twice daily. I listened to the drone. The drone was changing. On day 3, it had been monotone, a single sustained frequency. By day 5, there were overtones, harmonics that shifted within the cycle as if her body was learning to produce more complex sound. I documented this on my legal pad with the same rigor Zoe had applied to her own notes, and I tried very hard not to interpret it as development rather than deterioration. On day 4, I heard her move something in the room. A scraping sound. Furniture being pushed. I checked the gap and saw that she'd moved her desk against the wall. Not randomly, positioned beneath the air vent, where the building's dead ductwork provided the best acoustic resonance. She was optimizing her sound production, deliberately, purposefully arranging her space. I wrote, Day 4, spatial reorganization, purpose-driven behavior, not random. On day 5, something new. I was sitting in the living room eating peanut butter from the jar with a spoon when a sound came from her room that wasn't the drone. A tap, 3 taps, against the door. Rhythmic, spaced, deliberate. I froze, my spoon suspended between jar and mouth. 3 taps again. I stood up, walked to the door, put my hand against it. Zoe? No verbal response. But the tapping came again. 3 times, then a pause, then 3 times more. A pattern, consistent, reproducible. I tapped back 3 times, silence for 10 seconds. Then, from behind the door, 3 taps. I was breathing too fast. I forced my lungs into a professional rhythm, the one I used when a crane operator told me something had shifted and I needed to make decisions without panic. I tapped twice, pause, then 2 taps. I tapped 4 times, pause, longer this time, 5 seconds, then 4 taps. My daughter was communicating. I pressed my forehead against the door and breathed. Whatever was behind this wood, whatever her body had become, whatever her mind had reorganized into, it was still producing responsive, pattern-matching behavior. Not language, not speech, but call and response. Stimulus and corresponding output. Something. I spent the next hour developing a simple code. 1 tap, I'm here. 2 taps, water coming. 3 taps, yes. Silence, no. I had no way to teach this to her, to whatever she was now. But I repeated the patterns anyway, establishing a library of signals that might mean nothing to her, but meant everything to me. At the end of the hour, I tapped once. From behind the door, 1 tap, I'm here too. Day 7 brought the first real threat from outside. I'd been monitoring the hallway through the peephole intermittently, 3 times daily, a scheduled check. And for 5 days, the 6th floor had remained empty. Gerald's door stayed closed. The stain beneath it darkened but didn't spread. No one moved in the corridor. On day 7, at approximately 2 p.m. by my watch, the only clock still functioning, I heard footsteps in the stairwell. Not the mechanical rhythm of the infected. Actual footsteps, human gait, someone climbing. I pressed my eye to the peephole and waited. The stairwell door was visible at the end of the corridor, and after 30 seconds, it opened. A man in a winter coat, carrying a backpack. Young, maybe 25. Bearded, dirty, breathing hard. He stood in the corridor and looked at the row of doors, assessing. He tried Gerald's door first, found it unlocked. It swung open, and he recoiled from whatever he saw inside, but didn't retreat. He pulled his shirt over his nose, entered, and emerged 3 minutes later with canned goods in his arms that he stuffed into his backpack. Then he moved to the next door, tried it, locked. He moved on. He would reach my door, my reinforced, barricaded door that no amount of knocking would open. But he would also hear what I could hear. The drone from Zoe's room, which had become louder over the past 2 days, sometimes vibrating the hallway floor beneath my feet. He passed 2 more doors, one locked, one open, from which he emerged with a water bottle and what looked like a pharmacy bag. Then he was outside my apartment, standing there, listening. I watched his face through the peephole. The moment he heard it, the drone, his expression changed. His body stiffened. He took a step back, then another. His hand went to his belt, where a knife was sheathed. He didn't knock. He didn't call out. He turned and walked quickly back toward the stairwell, his movements controlled but fast. And he disappeared through the door without looking back. I stood at the peephole for another 10 minutes, breathing slowly, feeling the percussion of my heart in my teeth. He was gone. He hadn't tested the door. The drone, Zoe's sound, had functioned as a deterrent. Her presence, even in its transformed state, had protected the space. I went to her door and tapped once. 1 tap back. "Someone was here," I said. "They left because of you." No verbal response. But the drone shifted, rose slightly in pitch for a single cycle, then returned to baseline. I chose to interpret that as acknowledgement. I sat down in the hallway with my legal pad and wrote, Day 7. Zoe's vocalizations function as territorial deterrent. Unintentional or deliberate? Either way, protective. Either way, she's still keeping me safe. Day 10. I'd lost 6 pounds and gained something harder to measure. The apartment had become a functioning system. Primitive, stripped to essentials, but operational. I pushed water twice daily. I ate cold food from cans. I maintained a schedule that gave shape to hours that would otherwise dissolve into formless dread. I spoke to my daughter through the door. I tapped and received taps. I documented everything. The world outside had resolved into a new steady state. The initial chaos had passed. The running, the screaming, the percussion of bodies against barriers, and been replaced by a lower frequency existence. The infected below moved in patterns I could track by sound. Morning brought more activity. They responded to daylight, though whether they were attracted or agitated by it, I couldn't determine from 6 floors up. Nights were quieter. The building groaned and settled around us like a body finding a new resting position. On day 10, Zoe did something that changed everything. I was in the kitchen, rinsing my single bowl, conserving water, maintaining hygiene as a structural practice, when I heard it. Not the drone, not tapping. A sound I'd heard 1,000 times in my life, but hadn't heard in 10 days. Humming. A melody. Coming from behind her door. I set the bowl down and walked to the hallway. Stood outside her door. Listened. She was humming Blackbird, the Beatles song I'd sung to her as a lullaby when she was small. Not perfectly. The rhythm was strange. Elongated in some places and compressed in others, and the pitch wandered in ways that suggested her vocal apparatus was no longer capable of the precision it once had. But the melody was unmistakable. The intervals were correct. The musical structure was intact. She was humming a song from memory. My knees buckled. I slid down the wall to the floor, again, like I had on the night of her turning. And I pressed my hand against the door, and I listened to my daughter's body produce a melody it had no reason to retain. A melody from before. From when she was small and afraid of thunder, and I sat beside her bed with my hand on her back and sang her into sleep. She hummed it through twice. Then the drone resumed. But different now. The drone incorporated a fragment of the melody's rhythm, as if the music had been absorbed into the new language, integrated rather than abandoned. I tapped 3 times. Yes, I hear you. Yes. 3 taps back. I sat on the floor for an hour afterward, unable to move, holding the legal pad against my chest and failing to write anything because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not with fear, with something that didn't have a name. Something between devastation and hope that existed in a space no word had been built to contain. My daughter was still in there. Differently, incompletely, in a form I couldn't fully access or verify. But the melody was there, and the melody was mine. Something I'd given her that the transformation couldn't fully dissolve. A structural remnant in the architecture of whatever she'd become. Day 14, 2 weeks. My supplies were running low. 4 cans remaining. A scraping of peanut butter. Water reserves sufficient for another 3 days at current consumption. The timeline Zoe had given me was approaching. When the food runs out, you leave. I didn't want to leave. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd told me about the bite, where we'd eaten scrambled eggs on her last morning, where we'd designed the containment system together. And I looked at my options with the honesty of a professional assessing a failed project. Option 1. Leave. Take the fire escape. Head north. Find people. Survive. Carry the notebook. Honor her instruction. Option 2. Stay. Ration harder. Drink less. Buy days. Stay within the system we'd built together. Maintain the tap communication. Maintain the water deliveries. Maintain presence. Option 3, the one I hadn't let myself articulate until now, open the door. Not to die, not a surrender, but to see. to know what she looked like, to verify with my own eyes whether the melody and the tapping and the territorial drone and the water drinking were evidence of what I wanted them to be evidence of, or whether I was constructing meaning from mechanical repetition because the alternative was unbearable. I stood up, walked to the door, put my hand against the wood, warm, still warm from the heat she radiated constantly. "Zoe, I'm thinking about opening the door." The drone paused. Complete silence from behind the wood. 10 seconds, 20. Then, one tap. Slow, deliberate. "I'm here." "I know you're there. I want to see you." Silence. Then 3 taps in rapid succession, our code for yes, followed immediately by something new. A pattern I hadn't established. 5 taps, spaced evenly. Then 2 quick ones. Then 5 again. I didn't know what it meant. I pressed my ear to the door and listened. The pattern repeated. 525, 525. I sat with it, turned it over. 525. Our apartment number was 625. 625. Close to 525. Not quite right. Degraded. But close enough to suggest she was trying to give me something specific. A number, a code, a reference that mattered. Then I realized. Not the apartment number. Her birthday. May 25th, 525, 525. She was telling me her birthday. She was telling me she remembered who she was. I slid the chain off. I put my hand on the bolt. I breathed. "I'm opening it. If you come toward me, I'll close it. But I want to see you." 1 tap from inside. I pulled the bolt. I opened the door. She was standing in the center of the room, exactly where I'd seen her feet through the gap on day 3, facing me. Her posture was different. Wider, lower, more grounded. And her skin had taken on the matte quality I'd noticed that first day, intensified now into something almost mineral. Her eyes were open and focused on me, and they were different. The irises larger, darker, less distinct from the pupils. But they tracked my face, not my movement, my face. She didn't move toward me, didn't vocalize. The drone had stopped completely. She stood in absolute stillness and looked at me with an attention so total it felt physical. "Zoe," I said. Her head tilted, slightly, the way a bird tilts toward sound it's processing. "I'm here." She blinked, once, slowly. And then she did something that collapsed the remaining architecture of everything I thought I understood about what had happened to her. She sat down on her bed, deliberately, controlled. Not a collapse, a choice. She sat on the edge of her bed, where she'd sat 1,000 times before, and she looked at me standing in her doorway, and she patted the mattress beside her with her right hand. An invitation, a gesture so human, so ordinary, so utterly Zoe that I made a sound I couldn't categorize. Not a laugh, not a sob. Something between. She was asking me to sit beside her the way she used to when she was small and wanted a story before sleep, or the way she used to before the fighting started, before the closed doors and the tested boundaries, and the 6 months of architectural distance between us. I sat. The heat radiating from her body was intense, like sitting next to a wood stove, but not unbearable, not painful, warm in a way that felt intentional, protective. She didn't touch me. I didn't touch her. We sat side by side on her bed in the room I'd built into a containment cell. And the containment cell's door was open. And nothing in the world was contained. "I'm not leaving," I said. "Not yet. Not until I have to." She hummed. Not Blackbird. Something new. Something without a melody I recognized. A drone with shape, with intention, with what I could only describe as grammar. a sound that meant something in whatever language her body now spoke. I picked up her notebook from the desk where she'd left it 14 days ago. The last entry was there. Hour 24. Told my mother I know she loves me. For the record. Below it, in my handwriting, I wrote, Day 14. Daughter still present. Form changed. Connection intact. Architecture holds. I set the notebook down. I sat beside my daughter in the silence of a dead city, in an apartment that had become something neither prison nor home, but a territory defined by the space between two bodies who refused to be separated by the fact that only one of them was still human. Okay, I said. Show me what you need. I'm recording this at day 31. The notebook is almost full. I found more food. The scavenging man came back on day 19. And this time, I opened the front door and traded information for supplies. He couldn't believe I was living with one of them. He couldn't believe she hadn't killed me. I couldn't explain it in terms he'd understand. That she wasn't trying to kill anyone. That she drank water and hummed melodies and tapped responses and rearranged her room and sat beside me on the bed while I read aloud from the books on her shelf. That whatever she was now, it contained enough of what she'd been to honor the architecture we'd built together. I'm not leaving. Zoe told me to survive. And I'm surviving. She told me to go north, and I will. When she can come with me. Because I'm beginning to believe she can. The tapping has become more complex. The humming has become more structured. Yesterday, she walked to the kitchen and opened a can of soup herself. My daughter is still becoming. And I am here to witness every form she takes.